As surprising as this may come across, we are actually only covering a Harley Quinn story for the second time in this show's history. The only other time was way back in episode 34 when I covered the Batman storyline Hush. And that's kind of surprising given that, well, she's arguably the biggest character DC's created in the last 30 years. Sort of.
Yes, I am aware that Harley Quinn technically debuted in the Batman the Animated Series episode Joker's Favor, which aired in 1992. However, she actually did not appear in any mainline DC comics until 1999. That being said, the comic backstory was pretty much the same as the animated incarnation, with Harley being Dr. Harleen Quinzel, an Arkham Asylum psychologist who fell under the thrall of the Joker, which in and of itself actually appeared as an issue of the Batman the Animated Series comic book, Batman Adventures. Harley was popular enough in her mainstream comic incarnation that it would get an ongoing series starting in late 2000 and running until 2004. After that, though, Harley kind of fell into a limbo for about 5 years.
In 2009, Harley would eventually break away from the Joker and begin to carve an identity of her own in a comic book series called Gotham City Sirens. However, this turned out to be something of a mixed bag, as while she was finally away from the Joker and, like I said, getting her own identity, this also coincided with a costume redesign that saw her switch away from the traditional Harlequin outfit of Italian drama and into a new sexy revealing outfit that Jim Lee had designed for use in the Arkham Asylum video game series. Suffice to say, people were a little bit torn on this, particularly in the cosplay community where Harley was always popular.
Then DC's New 52 reboot happened and Harley's origin got tweaked slightly so that now the Joker had talked her into jumping into a similar vat of chemicals that had created him. This in turn would give Harley more of a violent streak and psychotic attitude that was far less wisecracky. Also, she would eventually wind up joining the Suicide Squad and given an even more revealing outfit.
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
Technically, what we're covering is a little bit before that.
Though polarizing, Harley's run with the Suicide Squad did prove popular enough for her to gain a new ongoing series starting in 2013. Though in and of itself, that also kind of got off on a bit of a wrong note. DC attempted to solicit some ideas for artists to apply variant covers. However, some of the art direction included suicidal ideation, and that in turn got leaked onto the internet. Thankfully, a ray of sunshine would appear in the form of the creative team for the book, husband and wife writing team Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor, the two of which had revitalized another polarizing female character, Power Girl, in the early to late 2000s.
The premise for the series would be set up in a special Zero issue that saw Harley Quinn living in an old storage locker and flipping through her past comic adventures, journeying through her various pop culture incarnations in an effort to try to find her true identity. This would all culminate in a mysterious benefactor willing Harley an old apartment building just off of Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York. Harley would then excitedly leap on her motorcycle and drive off to New York City for a whole new series of adventures all on her own. And those adventures are what we're covering today. This is Harley Quinn Volume 1, Hot in the City.
Harley arrives in New York City, stopping in traffic. Harley notices a dachshund being neglected by its hipster owner. A few tugs of the leash, and the woofer now has a new owner, and Harley's bike has a new trailer. That winds up getting interrupted by another biker attempting to blow Harley away with a shotgun. She doesn't take too kindly to all of her stuff being blown up, and turns around to blow off the guy's head. Finally, Harley makes it to her new building, which contains a group of apartments on top of a sideshow performance warehouse. That in turn has a penthouse on top for which will be Harley's new dwelling. Harley meets the sideshow troupe's leader, named Big Tony, who explains that every one of the performers are also the tenants in the apartments. It's then that the executor of the estate arrives to show Harley the penthouse where she will now be living. That being said, there's a bit of a catch, namely the taxes on the property, only 45% of which are covered by the tenant's rent. This of course means that Harley is going to need a job. Or, to be more precise, Dr. Harleen Quinzel is going to need a new job. Thankfully, her credentials are enough to land employment counseling dementia patients at an assisted living facility. That being said, Harley is still going to need a bit of an outlet for her more extroverted side, namely auditioning for the New York City Roller Derby League.
Roller derby is a sport that features two teams circling around an indoor track on roller skates. Points are scored when a team's jammer laps the opposing team while trying to avoid said opposing team who block her with blockers that try to hinder circumnavigation. It's a full contact sport that was really big in the early days of television and in particular in the 1970s, and played up a lot of zany characters a la professional wrestling, though unlike professional wrestling, roller derby is not technically scripted or predetermined, that I was able to piece together.
Harley lands a spot on the Brooklyn Bruisers and heads back to the penthouse to work on her tan by sunbathing. At night. Unbeknownst to her, a sword-wielding man begins sneaking up behind her, and it's only thanks to Big Tony's intervention that Harley isn't decapitated. Inspecting the body turns up a poster with a bounty of $2.6 million being placed on Harley's head. However, she has other concerns, mainly the fact that her penthouse isn't exactly furnished, and she needs money for furniture. She manages to broker a deal for a used medical fridge at a facility that's being shut down, before noticing a crowd gathering outside a pet shelter as she exits. The shelter is a euthanizing shelter with a surplus of 50 animals that are scheduled to be put down in the next 24 hours. Soft-hearted Harley immediately attempts to adopt, but is immediately rejected. Thankfully, Harley has some pretty decent connections, mainly her good friend, Poison Ivy, who is ready to meet Harley's new puppy and Bernie the Beaver.
Harley Quinn was not the only female bat nemesis to make the transition from villain to more anti-hero. She was also joined by Poison Ivy, first in the Gotham City Sirens book and then on the Suicide Squad in the New 52. Though they're not a romantic couple as of yet, it's obviously been hinted at as happening for a while at this point. Also, there's Bernie, the taxidermized beaver that had belonged to Harley's first boyfriend named Bernie Bash. Harley took the beaver when Bernie was sentenced to juvenile detention, and she's kept it ever since, even after the Joker burned it with some acid. Harley is able to communicate with Bernie, though this is obviously all taking place in her head, and she only hears her half of the conversation. Now, I'm kind of glad this thing actually got a name, because even with Safe Search on, Googling Harley Quinn Beaver just turned up a lot of disturbing fan art of Margot Robbie.
Harley and Ivy break into the shelter to set the animals free, only for them to immediately run out into the streets where another bounty hunter attempts to take out Harley. She deals with him and sets about collecting as many pets as she can, with the only problem being is that they immediately start trying to eat Bernie. Before leaving, Ivy turns a section of the penthouse into a small park for Harley's new pets to play in. Now about those animal droppings. Unfortunately, there's not much time to deal with that, as Valentine's Day soon hits, and Harley is without any type of romantic activity going on, even going as far as to just shooting up a Coney Island dark ride. It's even extended to the tenants, as Big Tony is in a tilt with his romantic companion Queenie. Tony is down, though not enough for pity sex from Harley. After a bath, Harley notices some housewarming gifts that Ivy left behind, namely some plants, one of which includes a very unique-smelling berry that appears to be edible. She swallows a couple of berries before heading out for a night of clubbing. However, as soon as she exits the building, a prison bus topples over, and a gaggle of now-escaped convicts begin looking at Harley with the exact same idea. Mine. Harley darts into a nearby hardware store for some DIY weapons as more and more men begin falling in love with her. She grabs several implements and begins mowing through her romantic pursuers as the cops soon arrive. However, that all turns to be for naught as Harley tries to explain things only for the female police officer to begin making out with her. Harley manages to rush back to the penthouse and immediately launches the plant into the nearby zoo. Tony arrives as the berry's effects begin to wear off, but then he winds up eating one of the berries and becomes the new romantic affection for everyone. The next day, Dr. Quincella prefers to work at the long-term care center while Tony and the other sideshow employees begin preparing for an addition to the penthouse. Harley's day consists mainly of many old folks constantly complaining about not seeing their families. Finally, a patient named Mrs. Rubenstein gets to Harley's goat just enough that she decides to skip out on her next patient, a Mr. Borgman, and begin tracking down the family in question. Harley finds a father obsessed with model trains, a son concerned only with video games, and her daughter-in-law selling massage devices. Harley crashes into the house and takes all three hostage, intending them to force to visit Mrs. Rubenstein on a more regular basis. However, it turns out they actually do visit Mrs. Rubenstein on a more regular basis, at least 3 times a week even. It turns out Mrs. Rubenstein is an Alzheimer's patient with dementia so severe that she just automatically forgets the visits. Realizing her mistake, Harley abandons the trio on the beach and returns back to Mr. Borgman, who has a revelation of his own. He, in fact, knows that she's actually Harley Quinn and not just Harleen Quinzel, as he is really Master Super Spy Cy Borgman.
Yes, this character is actually named Cy Borgman, and he is a cybernetically enhanced super spy from the Cold War era, who is now enlisting Harley's aid and taking down several Soviet sleeper agents who are still hiding out in the United States.
Bored with her new job, Harley is naturally down for helping Mr. Borgman, who turns over several dossiers while the two stop off for chili dogs. That being said, there's still a further complication of the fact that Harley still has a bounty on her head. Harley falls asleep reading through the files and is pretty sure she's memorized them by the time she and Cy head out the next night. Their first target is Igor Lenevetskin, who is already in a coma, so all they have to do is just pull the plug. Which plug that is, however, is yet to be determined, so Harley just puts a few oxygen bubbles into Lenevetskin's circulatory system, and that takes care of that. The next target is Ivana Brekhamov, who is now a high-ranking Russian diplomat. However, she's been expecting the two, and when they appear to have the upper hand, she managed to trigger a massive explosion device, taking out the entire mansion she lives in. Thankfully, Cy's mobility scooter has a grappling cables attached to it, which allow it to hook on to a passing chopper. Harley appears to be pulling Brekhamov to safety, but in reality, she's just trying to pry all the jewelry off her fingers before dropping her back down to a fiery death. After commandeering the chopper, the two head over to the Prospect Park Zoo and to take out its night watchman, who is actually Alexei Medvedenko, aka the Russian Bear.
They're going after Ivan Koloff?
Inside the cage, with the United States heavyweight title on the line.
However, the Bear has actually been alerted to the two's activities thanks to the news and begun preparations by freeing all the animals at the zoo. Ironically enough, though, the bears are not actually in the mood to do much of anything, so the Russian immediately begins poking the bears and immediately gets decapitated, proving the analogy to actually be quite apt. However, backup arrives shortly after Cy and Harley find the remnants of the bear. The spy, not the actual bear. It turns out that the bear managed to alert all of his surviving fellow agents in the United States, including Cy Borgman's former paramour, Zena Bendova.
Yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, all the Russians have really bad pun names.
However, Cy Borgman has a few tricks up his sleeves, like incendiary bagels. Harley is able to take down the other agents, leaving Zena only for Cy. Bendova literally attempts the old make-out, stab him in the back maneuver, only to wind up impaled on a rhino horn for good measure. That leaves just one last man, Chuck, who is not a Russian agent and is in fact just a used car salesman who sold Cy a dream car that turned out to be a lemon that got stripped when it ran out of radiator fluid and gas on the highway. That soon gets taken care of and the two head back to the retirement home. When Harley returns home, Poison Ivy is waiting for her. It turns out that Ivy used some connections in the Suicide Squad to track down the IP address of the individual who put the hit out on Harley, and it's on Harley's laptop. But first, they can have some fun together by checking out some of the Speedo men out on the beach. That night, Harley watches Ivy sleep to figure out if she's going to be attacked or who's using her laptop, only for Harley to wake up and begin putting the hit out on herself at Bernie's behest, upping the total to $5 million. Soon, two killers come crashing through the skylight.
Which soon takes a very unfortunate turn, as it turns out that Harley and Ivy brought home one of those beach hunks for reasons, and he soon winds up getting caught in the crossfire.
The commotion snaps Harley out of her somnambulistic state and she kills the two killers. An inspection of one of their phones turns up a meeting at the local guild concerning the bounty. Intent on changing minds and calling off the hit, Harley and Ivy crash the meeting with Arvy wrapping up everyone in the guild in vines. However, no one there has believed that Harley would actually be so stupid as to put a hit on herself, which means they basically have to kill all the bounty hunters in order to get the bounty cancelled. Harley then sets about fencing the stolen jewelry she got from Ivana Brekhamov and breaking up a store robbery at the pawn shop. Things seem to be going well for her until she gets a little too violent in the next roller derby clash, bringing her mallet out onto the track and getting the team disqualified and having to now compete in the underground skate club circuit.
With you all singing, all dancing crap at the world.
Still, Harley now has enough money to finish her grand plan that she and Tony have been working on. A giant catapult to get rid of all the hip people corpses and animal droppings by launching them into the Brooklyn Bridge.
Well, I mean, it is New York City, so no one will probably notice. Anyway, that concludes our look at Harley Quinn Hot in the City. How was it? Well, I really like this story. I think it's fun. I think there's some really good humor and characterization throughout all of this. I love the supporting cast of characters. I didn't touch on them much, but the sideshow performers really do feel like actual people in this, and they get along with Harley. And, you know, a character like Big Tony, for example, I mean, it would be easy to just turn him into maybe like some type of pseudo love interest, but, you know, he already has a girlfriend, and he's just kind of like friendly to Harley. I mean, she is his landlord, but maybe, you know, again, you could see that he would try to get along with her, maybe even if she wasn't. And you know what? There's some really nice artwork throughout all this. It's not Amanda Conner, who normally draws these things. She actually co-writes the series with her husband, Jimmy Palmiotti. But, you know, it's very much in the vein of Amanda Conner if you've seen her artwork. This is an artist who definitely knows how to lay in cheesecake art appropriately. Like I said, it's sexy, but it's not overtly and in your face all the time to the point it just wears off. If there is kind of a downside in this, I think it's just the pacing of the book. The fact that we're following, you know, we have Harley moving to the city, adjusting to life in the city, dealing with the bounty hunters, but then also getting enlisted in the Cy Boardman spy stuff. Like, maybe, you know, if they just spread it out a little bit, because it's like, we have Harley, like the roller derby stuff is introduced like it's going to be big, and then, yeah, it just disappears for a few issues. Same thing with the bounty hunters. Like, they just disappeared for 3 issues. It's just like, you know, if those were meant to be more running threads in this, they didn't do a good job with that. Like I said, it can feel just a little clunky and awkward sometimes, where I thought it's like, oh, we're dealing, oh, no, wait, no. And so they're like, it can be a little unfocused. Like, maybe, you know, have either the Cy Boardman stuff take place after the bounty hunters or before the bounty hunters. Or, yeah, it's just like have the bounty hunters pop up a couple of times in between the Cy Boardman things. That, I think that would have worked a little bit better. Also, this is a mature reader's book. It's not labeled as such, but it probably should be. There's some pretty graphic violence. There's a lot of sex jokes throughout this. So, yeah, I probably would not give this to younger readers. You know, maybe if they, I don't know how many of them will watch the... If you've seen the Harley Quinn animated series, I think you see a lot of the roots of that in the stories. But, you know, I don't know if any of the, you know, like, younger kids shouldn't be watching that series, but, you know, if they watch, you know, Batman the Animated Series or something like that, and they like Harley Quinn, I don't know if this is necessarily for them, just again because of the content, and that's why I can't quite give it a full recommendation, even though I do enjoy it. I am going to be giving Harley Quinn Hot in the City a B. Like I said, just because I can't recommend this to everyone, I have to kind of hold back a little bit on that. Sorry. Now, normally this is where I'd say we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review by pulling something out of the randomizer. But we've got something special instead. We're coming up on 10 years of the Random Trade Review, and I'm going to be doing something very unique.
Hey guys, remember you can help support the channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcat productions. There you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. And as always, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.